Okay, cool. Awesome.
Hey everyone, welcome to another 100 Days of No Code workshop. Really pleased to be joined by Kev, who's going to be walking us through how to actually validate all the ideas that we keep having in our head, but don't quite know which ones to focus on. So this will give us clarity and hopefully direction on where to put our time and energy, and invest in the best ideas and make sure we're validating them along the way. So yeah, we're going to have some time for questions at the end as well. To pick Kev's brain, which has got 10 plus years worth of startup experience. So it's definitely one worth picking. But without further ado, I can chuck it over to you, Kev, and we can get going.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Let me get my screen ready to go. Cool. Give me a second.
Sure, no worries.
Cool. Can everyone see that screen?
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Let me move this around as well so I can get going. Okay, cool. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about just validating startups, validating ideas with a particular focus on financials. So I ran this session for the University of Sydney. They asked me to do a session like this for entrepreneurs. So chatted to Max about it and thought I would kind of rejig it for kind of the no code community. So yeah, without kind of further ado, let's jump in. So yeah, firstly, just a little bit about myself. I've been in tech for about 10 years. And before that, I was in banking. And then I started my own company called Fiestify, which is a travel startup, travel marketplace. It was a travel startup that allowed you to find major events where you traveled. And then the next one I did was a travel marketplace where I was an early employee at a company called JRide that's now on the stock exchange. And then I just spent 5 years at a company called Workyard, which was a construction marketplace that turned into kind of a workforce management platform for people in construction for stuff like time tracking and paying employees. I left there in February, and in March, I kind of decided that I'm going to do a year dedicated to building businesses. And I've called that a bootstrap sabbatical, where I'm trying to launch a business every 2 months until I find my next kind of big thing. So far, thanks to Max and the no code community, I've launched this newsletter called the Tech Report. I launched um, um, kind of a tool for a tool for parents to kind of take photos of their kids' artwork and turn into a masterpiece called Kid Casso. And as of today, I just launched the Noble Sage Liquor Company. So yeah, super. Still running on adrenaline about that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But that's kind of my backstory. Cool. So the agenda is basically starting with sourcing ideas, and where can you find ideas. Then after that, how do you validate those ideas, and then kind of jumping down a little bit further into actual financial validation. So the outcome is basically being able to quickly use financials to validate business ideas. And any time, feel free to jump in as well and ask a question. Max, you can let me know if there's something in the chat that comes up that you want to pause.
Of course.
So yeah,
So,
feel free. Yeah, I'll save anything to the end. We'll have some time, but I'll leave it up to you, Max.
cool.
So cool. Like let's talk about sourcing ideas. So obviously the number one is just like life. So what's something that pains you or takes time that you hate doing, or maybe that other people hate doing and you actually like doing that you could turn into a business. One little analogy I like is like, what's something that you pay for that doesn't give you like 10x value or the joy that it's worth. So maybe you get a bill for something that you absolutely hate. Maybe it's something like car insurance. You're like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. Like, how do I come up with a better way to make that cheaper or more affordable? And so look at things that kind of are pains to people or pains in your own life. The next thing is just like corporate problems. So, if you work in a current company, what's something that you dislike doing there, or that they always struggle with, that that you can solve, and ideally maybe you could kind of solve it for them, build the tool out, and then kind of validate it there, and then leave the company and kind of replicate that into an actual business or a software company. The other one I have there is just industry specific. So maybe it's like sometimes something I like doing is sitting down with friends and saying, like, understanding what they actually do in their business. So I have a friend who's a day trader. They're not just trading Dogecoin on crypto exchanges, but he's a legitimate foreign exchange trader, and another one's an equities trader, and just chatting to them about like how they find information, how they get their news, what problems do they have, what do they hate doing in their job, maybe it's doing taxes or something like that. So understanding that something would pain them and say, yeah, can I like sit with you, understand this, and build this for you? Or there's a particular industry we can solve that and replicate it. The next thing is just like news. So one thing is always like trending industries. So I'm a big fan of this guy. I'm just looking up on my bookshelf, a guy called Felix Dennis, who's actually a British entrepreneur. I wonder if Max knows him. He started Maxim magazine. He died about 2008, but he wrote a great book called How to Get Rich, which is like a terrible title, but a really good book. And one analogy I really like is he constantly talks about where do you like, there's all these mountains of kind of gold and money, and it's just about you finding the right one that's kind of right for you. And he talks about trending industries. So where there's an industry that's trending, that's often where the money's flowing to. So just by looking at the news and seeing which companies are kind of getting funding rounds in particular industries, maybe it's like artificial intelligence, stuff like crypto is really big at the moment. So everyone kind of knows that. So that's usually where the money's going and where there's kind of opportunities. So trending industries, look at other startups that have just got funding. Maybe there's something that's a great idea overseas that just got funded that you can kind of replicate back home. The next idea is just like social media, obviously, just being on Twitter, Facebook, going into Facebook groups and seeing what people kind of complain about or ask questions about. Maybe you can find an industry Facebook group that they always talk about a particular problem, and if that always comes up, maybe there's something ripe for you to solve it. So next one is just a bunch of giveaways, like dedicated idea newsletters and communities that specifically push out businesses that you can find. So one of them I like, I'll go through them all quickly, but I'm sure we know a few of them. But Exploding Topics just talks about things that are trending on Google that are kind of suddenly blowing up. Product Hunt, obviously people launching new products, new SaaS companies. So that's always a good spot to look out for things. Another idea is just looking at what was kind of number one on Product Hunt like 2 years ago or 3 years ago and seeing if it's still around. Maybe you liked it and now it's dead. And maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe they were too early. Software ideas is similar to stuff like Trends.co, where they kind of release ideas with industry research. So Trends.co is a big kind of Facebook community. It's run by The Hustle. And they release kind of pretty in-depth reports on different industries, as well as kind of tricks and tips to growing a business. Whereas Trends.vc focuses on particular industries, marketplaces, and gives you kind of ideas about them. And then Under the Radar is by another kind of indie hacker, Jacob Greenfeld, who kind of inspired me to do my bootstrap sabbatical. And so he's doing something similar as kind of the rest of these. And then the last one is just buy and sell sites. So Microacquire, Flipper, there's a bunch of them that you can go and look at what's selling and saying, wow, this company sold for like 1.2 million. And all it does is makes people like dentists like book appointments, or it's like calendar leave for dentists, or whatever it is. Maybe you're going to replicate that in your own company, in your own country, or in a different industry, and realize like, wow, I just have to get to 1,200 users and I can sell this for $1.2 million. That's pretty awesome. Cool. So onto the next thing. So one of the reasons I started my little tech report newsletter that I did in the no code challenge was because I wanted to get some of these things. I was looking at them myself. So I wanted to scratch my own itch. And so the report that I built basically takes stuff like industry stuff that's happening in Australia, what's happening on Startup Smart, Startup Daily, what's happening in TechCrunch. And so I get all that information in one newsletter. And so a bunch of Aussies subscribe to this now. I purposely built this to kind of scratch my own itch to get all this information. So yeah, just quickly before I jump into like validating businesses, I always like to evaluate a business. So I'm just going to quickly go through how I do that. So I have like a really simple thing that you can also build on no code. I'm really big into Notion. And so my evaluation method, basically when I come up with like a crazy business idea, I just write it down in my notes. I have this notebook that's kind of my startup black book. And I write up the idea, I write up a little bit about it. I might write up a pitch if it like just suddenly comes to me. And then I kind of sit down, and I actually do this in a book initially, but now I've started doing it in Notion, where I think about 4 major things, and that's the difficulty, the costing, the conviction, and the passion. So let's kind of jump in. So this is like an actual example that I use for Kid Casso. So when I had Kid Casso, it's just called Kids Art Canvases. And on Notion, you can see there that I believe that the difficulty to actually build this was kind of easy to medium. It's pretty easy. We basically have to get parents to take photos of their kids' artwork, send it to us. And then my sister, who's an interior designer, takes that artwork and basically makes a masterpiece out of it in a collage. And then kind of the ongoing cost is quite simple. Once we've kind of built like an Airtable form for people to upload things, set up the Shopify store, we could just kind of keep it running. And, she could do that when the kind of orders came in. We didn't have to kind of buy a whole bunch of frames. We could kind of order them on demand. And then like the next thing I think about is my conviction levels, like how big of a problem is this? So with that particular example, my sister's an interior designer. She was already doing this for clients. They loved it. Basically, clients would pay her to do, 3-bedroom house. And in the kids' room, she would see all this kind of artworks, like kids would kind of have a pile of artworks kind of on the floor. And the parents would say, what do we do with this? Like, these boxes of art. And my sister would say, choose the top 10 that you love, give them to me and leave them with me. And she would take those, take high resolution photos, make a kind of a collage of them, print them out amazingly, frame them, and then put them on the wall. And when the client came and saw the kids' room, they'd see this amazing artwork and be like, wow, this is amazing. And what do I do with all these other artworks? And she says, just if you want to throw them away, you can, because you've kind of like made a masterpiece out of like 8 of them into this collage, and the kids are going to be happy. They're not going to judge you one day that you didn't love them and that you didn't like cherish their art, because you literally framed an artwork. And because of this, when I noticed that, I thought this could be a business in its own right, instead of like her doing it when it's just interior design job. So my conviction was high. Everyone loved them when she did it for them. And then in terms of passion, look, I don't have kids. It's not like a 10 out of 10, but I am an artist, and I studied art history and theory. So I know art. I did a business with my sister when I was a teenager. So my passion for this was like, yeah, I really like this. It was kind of a 7 out of 10. So yeah, that's just it in practice. And so if you think about like kind of your unicorn side hustle, what you're really looking for, something that's like, in terms of difficulty, it's really easy to spin up. The costing's cheap. And as I said, I do my costing on kind of the setup and the ongoing. My conviction's high. So maybe there's people on Twitter asking about this or complaining about this, or there's already a bunch of other companies that do this, but they're not maybe in your area. And then your passion's high. And the way I think about passion is, I ask myself a question, which is, if I roll out of bed in 3 years' time and I'm the guy who started Picasso, I'm the guy who started Noble Sage Liquor Company, would I still get out of bed? Am I still excited about this? Do I want to be that guy? Do I want that on my LinkedIn? And usually I rule out like so many things like that. I think about different businesses and I go, oh, this is like pretty easy to do. The costing's cheap. My conviction's high. I think the market's right. I have a friend who constantly pitches an idea to me, and I just kind of constantly say to him, like, my passion on this is just super low. Like, I just couldn't be less interested in this idea. And I believe it's going to work. I believe all this stuff, but I just don't see myself getting out of bed in 3 years' time being the guy who built this particular software company. So I think that's a major one. Cool. So one of the ideas, one of the things that I think was actually raised in the 100 Days of No Code during our Slack conversations was like, how do you take a business idea, like an abstract idea, and turn it into a business? So I've kind of taken this and I'm going to kind of expand into that a bit more. So it's kind of like a process. And this is kind of the process that I use. So I'll be going through them. So basically it starts with validating the idea. We've basically just evaluated an idea, whether we want to bother, and then we want to validate it. We then want to set up goals and anti-goals. I'm going to focus mostly on financials in the session. And then there's some other things I like to do, like business identity. And I'm not going to go into that, but that basically means like, what kind of business do you want to be? Do you want to be like a green business? Do you want to be a fun business? Do you want to be serious? All the brands that you kind of love, whether it's like Apple or Nike, they all have a certain identity, a certain tone. So understanding that and thinking about that before you start building out always helps. And then kind of architecture, like how do you want to build this? So I often, recently on our mastermind, I read an idea by Max and said, like, how would we solve this problem? What architecture could we quickly do to do that? So what can we plug in to build this tool? And then it's, get started, just build it. So in terms of validation, the first thing that I do is just like research. Obviously, kind of like any minute wasted research is like a minute that you're not really doing to action it. So that's kind of true. You don't want to spend months researching, but like a quick bit of research will solve you, getting stuck into code or no code and building something that no one really wants. So the first thing is like, is this actually a real pain? Like, is it just like a vitamin? Is it actually a painkiller? That's kind of the typical startup saying. And kind of a painkiller is going to be 10x better than anything else in the market and will really solve it. To the point that if you take that away from them, they're actually going to be really annoyed that that problem's there. I stuck around and worked at this construction company. I was never super passionate about construction, but I did always want to be an architect when I was a kid. And one thing that kind of really kept me there is when we launched the product, it was kind of this marketplace for construction people to find other construction people. And I remember when we actually closed down in Sydney, or actually even better than that, when we actually, we kind of pivoted and that we started verifying people, and there were some bad actors. And we kind of gave them a few warnings about being bad actors in the marketplace. And it's kind of very interesting. With some of them, we actually like had to delete their user base. We had to kind of like kill their profile. And they would actually call us and like literally threaten us, be really aggressive. And that's like a crazy thing to happen. But, when we told investors, they were like blown away. Like it couldn't be better news for them. Imagine telling investors we had threats from people and they're excited about that. And you're like, what the hell? And that's because like, this is such a pain that people are willing to like call you, abuse you, threaten you because they want this product so bad. So that's a real painkiller. And then the next thing is, what's the market size? So typically in startups, we call it TAM, total addressable market size. And that's just getting an idea of, how big is the market? So with something like Noble Sage, we know the liquor market is massive. The pre-packaged cocktail market, which you've just entered in, is only growing. So you kind of like just have to do some research and reports and get an idea whether it's a growing industry, and just do kind of a quick check there, where there's actually a market for this. The next thing is competitors. So, people come up with a crazy startup idea, and then all of a sudden they look and they find competitors, or they keep it secret, and then they tell, one friend, and that one friend finds a competitor and sends it to you. And basically, you feel like your soul got crushed because there's some other competitor, there's someone else out there, and you kind of get super worried. And basically, like, you shouldn't be worried. You should just be excited that there's actually someone else who has idea. It means there's a real pain point. If there's alternatives, how can you be different? But I guess in terms of alternatives, the one thing I think about is, can someone solve this problem another way? Do they have to use your solution, or is there like quite an easy way to take this pain away by doing a couple more steps than just what you're selling? The next thing is differentiating. So like, how do you differentiate yourself from a competitor? So that's something just to think about. But yeah, if there's competition, the market's healthy, that's a good thing. The next thing is just pitching customers. So this is obviously super important to just like put the idea out there, see if there's people there. And the most important thing with that is actually identifying your customers. So there's kind of like a statement that I think like early stage founders like massively underestimate distribution, and that's the next thing. So if you want to go out and you have an idea, you want to try pitch it to customers who you're going to solve this problem for. And if you can't find those customers to pitch that problem to, if you can't do it now, how are you going to do it once you build your product? Like, it's not a matter of build the product and they will come. It's a little bit of that, but that's really not true. You want to be able to kind of put the idea out there and try get people coming. And giving you feedback on it. And if it's that hard to find them, like that's a massive problem, because you're going to kind of spend so much on marketing, or how you're going to find them. You need to be able to find your customers. One little analogy that I like to think about is with kind of the marketplaces I was in. Something like Joyride was a marketplace that connected people with shuttle buses going to the airport. And I kind of came up with this analogy that if you could go for a walk in the city for about 5 minutes or about a kilometer, and you could kind of see your customer or see a few of your customers, you kind of know you have like a business. So with that company, it was basically shuttle buses. So if you walked around the city, you'd see a bunch of hotels. You'd always see like, Steve's shuttle bus company outside of the hotel, and you'd be like, boom, that's my customer. That's one of the customers that I can service. When it came down to Workyard, what I really liked about that business was you just walk down the street and you can see like Joe's Plumbing outside, here, and there's literally a construction site across the road from you, so you can literally walk there. They're your customers. So I like to use that as kind of an analogy. And when you walk around the streets and you go, I'm Airbnb, how do I identify my customers? You kind of look at hotels, you kind of think, holy shit, like anyone could basically be my customer. Anyone has a spare room. So that's kind of the idea I like to think about. Cool. So just a little thing is like, I just tweeted this out at one point when I came up with this slide kind of a month ago, which is like kind of the verified facts are that you have a painkiller when you know someone basically is going to pay you to take this pain away, and there's enough of those people to make it a business. So after I've kind of done validation, I then define the concept of winning. So that winning is kind of like a simple statement, which is kind of like a SMART goal, which is like, I want to launch X, or I want to launch NX that generates Y by month so-and-so. So for me, it's like, I want to launch a liquor store. I want to launch an e-commerce store that generates $1,000 MRR by the end of this year. And that might be my kind of winning statement. If I can get there, that's pretty solid. And so when I have that kind of statement, I then can think about like, what are my goals? And how am I going to achieve them? What's a good outcome? What's a really awesome outcome? And the next thing is like, what are my anti-goals? What don't I want out of this business? So for me, just like a little thing is like with the tech report, I actually thought about this, and I was kind of like, I'm going to create a newsletter, and I'm going to like wake up, I'm going to come start working at like 11 p.m. at night. So about 1 a.m., I'm going to read a bunch of articles, and I'm going to throw them in this newsletter, and then I'm going to send them out to everyone in the morning. And I just thought to myself, like, in terms of my end, like, what don't I want from this? Is like, I don't want to spend every day curating a newsletter. Like, that's crazy. It's like a big waste of time. It's not going to be beneficial for this. So one of my anti-goals in the tech report was that I didn't want to be curating it every day. It'd just be way too timely, way too painful. So it's about setting what you don't want as well. And it's often more important than the actual goal that you're trying to achieve. So the example I'm going to be using is like the Noble Sage Liquor Company. This site is now officially dead. That countdown's gone down and gone the other way. And it's now live, which is awesome. But we'll skip on to this, but we're going to be using the Noble Sage kind of just to make it easy as kind of the goals. So kind of my goal would be 10 people buy bottles in our first month. And I go, yeah, that's a pretty good goal. That's pretty good validation. And then I have another thing, which is like my fuck yeah goal, which is like, you're popping bottles, you're excited, your hands up in the air, you're running around in circles. And that's like sell entire first production batch within 5 days of launching, or something like that. You launch your micro SaaS tool and you have like 1,000 people sign up in the first day. Just something really, can be as crazy as you want, but it's good just to have this like really awesome goal that's achievable, but is also what you typically call in engineering as a stretch goal. So now I'm going to jump into the actual like financial validation and how I think about businesses from a financial perspective and whether it's actually worth pursuing them. So these are all like super high level. So one of the things I always think about is when I come up with a new idea, I kind of say to myself, like, what would it take to make this a $10,000 business? Maybe that's per month, maybe it's per year, but let's play it per year. What would it take to be a $100,000 business, $1 million business? And then basically, like, depending on how big of a business you want this to be, whether it's a side hustle, whether it's a startup, you can start like asking these questions, like how many customers at a certain price point would it take to get to, 10,000, 100,000, a million, how much would I have to actually sell this to earn a basic salary? So one thing I chat with some kind of early stage founders and they say, I want to do this. I've got this e-commerce store I'm setting up. And, I say to them, like, you can go finish university, this level and these cool startup hats that you're working on and you're making $10 like profit per each one. How much is it going to take to get to $50,000 or a salary that you can pay yourself? Go off a little bit. What I will say is like every dollar that you earn for yourself is worth like twice to 5 to 10 times more than it is just getting paid by someone else. The gratitude of it and the effort that you put in is much harder, but much more worth it. And it's one of my mentors kind of told me this when I first started in the entrepreneur space, and it resonated with me, even though it like logically makes no sense. But you can earn $50,000 working for someone else, or you can earn $5,000 launching some micro SaaS tool, and like I guarantee you that will feel so much better. The pats on your back to yourself are just worth so much more. So it's something to think about. So even though it can turn you off, just you want to pay your bills, but you also want to be an entrepreneur, and I'm not going to turn anyone away from that. The next thing is like, does it just make financial sense? Is this effort worth the reward when you kind of do those little bits of maths? So just really quickly, so you've got these ideas. You want to get to $10,000, and you're selling them like some kind of subscription tool or like a micro SaaS tool that's $10 per month. 30,000 users, 1,000,000, 100,000 users that you have to like kind of keep up with every month. And one of the main things that, when you get in startups, if you're not bootstrapping, you're going to be wanting that is going to ask you to be able to model that this could be $100 million business valuation. Doesn't mean you need to have that much revenue. You need to have like something that multiplies to that. So maybe it's getting to $20 million like revenue business. That's you're kind of valuing it at 5 times your revenue, and just doing that. So if you go, cool, it's $1 million at 100,000 to get to 20 million per year. You're looking at quick math, 2 million users, I guess, to get there. So is this plausible? Is the market big enough? And you're not going to capture the whole market. You're going to capture 5% or 10%, 1% of the market. So just something to think about. Cool. So let's get a little bit more technical on financials. This is kind of like fairly basic financials for most people. If you haven't done like business school, this will help you out. And it's just to kind of like help with more of that validation and getting into like deeper financial analysis. But for anyone who's kind of done business or accounting, it's quite basic. So let's get some technical. First, a little background, maybe making some alcohol. So with the Noble Sage Liquor Company, what we do is we basically take alcohol, we put in barrels, and before we put the alcohol in the barrels, we actually have to season the barrels with a different kind of alcohol, a different kind of flavor, and then we put the alcohol in there. And when you make a cocktail, it's not just like one alcohol, you're putting different ingredients. You then have to kind of put that in bottles, put labels on it, put it in boxes, and then you have to ship it. So there's all these different components. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background because this is the example we're going to use to kind of work out our COGS. Cool, so let's jump in, let's make some alcohol. So just doing the maths on like a cocktail and what kind of goes into it. This is all like kind of made up numbers just to make it easy, but you've got like your alcohol, you've got 2 ingredients, they got different prices, and basically your cocktail is going to cost you $450 of input. You're going to make 10 liters. After that, you're going to have to buy bottles. And when you've got a business, you can buy a bottle for $1, or if you kind of scale up, you can buy 20 bottles for $4 a pop. So let's go, cool, we're going to buy 20 bottles for $4 a pop. Next up, you've got to buy a barrel. So you've got this barrel, you have to put some port inside it to kind of season it. And then, you can't just keep using that barrel as many times you like. It's kind of got a lifespan. So you've kind of got only so many uses of that barrel before you have to throw it away. It's kind of like a depreciation. So I've basically got that 500 plus 100, which is 600 divided by 8 to get that. Stop me if I'm going too quick. And then you basically
Kev,
as well. So,
Kev, can you hear me?
boxes, yeah,
It's slightly lagging a bit. Kind of the
okay.
connect. It's kind of coming in and out a bit. I wasn't sure if there's just anything. Yeah, you can do on your side, or kind of coming in and out, or video off, or yeah, just
Mm.
to well,
Yeah,
yeah,
let me try. Yeah, let me try video off
sure,
and see how we go. Is
sure,
that a little? It's yeah. It's saying my internet's unstable, but I usually have no issues. Um,
yeah. Let's give that a go.
yeah,
Yeah, and see
interesting.
how we go.
Okay, cool. I'll also especially because we're doing some kind of maths. Um, so cool.
Cool,
Let's try this out, and then
great.
I'll maybe put my camera on a little bit. Cool. All right. So just looking at all those kind of inputs, I said we've got the cocktail, $450. We've got the bottle. You're going to get kind of 20 of them at $4 a pop. You've got this barrel, which you kind of have to factor in a depreciation, and you're going to be using it per use. And you've got 8 uses of that. And then you've basically got your packaging as well. So you've got labels and you've got boxes. And so I've kind of highlighted each of those components. Cool. So basically, to get to 10 liters, you've got your alcohol, your bottles, your barrel depreciation, and then you've got box and labels. So your kind of total cost is $640. And then basically, you're going to be looking at, per 500 mil, you're looking at $32 per pop because you've got 10 liters, you've got 500 mils kind of bottles, which basically you're dividing that by 20, so you're getting to $32. And then just in terms of what you charge at, you can change those costings. This is where you want to kind of play with your costing. So, you might charge it $80 and then your kind of cost of goods is 32, which means your kind of contribution margin is $48. So that's kind of the difference, and your margin is 60%. So we'll kind of go into this a little bit more in a second. So this is kind of where I play with, this is where I start validating. So I've kind of just done these financials, and I now have to ask myself these questions like, what is it going to take to sell $2,000 a month, or $10,000 a month, or $50,000 a month? So you can see at 20,000 at the cost of 80, we're going to have to sell 25. That's what our margin would be. And because I'm partnering with one of my best friends in this, we kind of have to split that. So I'm only making half of that. And then we have to work out how many liters we have to produce before, we have to scale up. Is that viable? So you might have like a server or something else. You might be doing something manually in your business. Like I know Max is doing like a running company. And so I don't know what the process is into that, but maybe there's only so many of this particular product you can produce at a time before, like, the machines are going to blow up because you just can't produce at that level. So you kind of have to ask yourself, well, I can't get to $10,000 because we have to produce, 62.5 liters. That's crazy. It's way too much. So that's the quick validation I do. And then the next thing I kind of do is, if I'm happy with it and it kind of passes passes that initial validation, I start kind of playing with an idea, which is like, this is my goal. So at the beginning, we kind of set our goal, and maybe I said to myself, I want to start a liquor company that makes $2,000 a month by the end of the year. And one of the kind of hot tips with validation is, always make your models formulaic, which means that you can change one thing and it impacts everything else in a really nice way. So if you can see in this example that I always look at kind of growth, and I always factor that in. So we're growing at 10% month to month is a goal. You don't want to start a business that's not growing. That's a problem. You don't want to be growing too rapidly. But early on, you can grow quite quickly, 10, 20% a month. So I've also got a price there at $80. And you can see there that, by December, we're only making $12.88 by the end of the year. So I'm not really meeting my goal. So I have to start playing with the numbers a little bit. So here I go and I go, cool, what happens if we just aimed a little bit higher for our launch? Like if we aim for 15 bottles in July, you can kind of see that by January, we're making $2,000, but still by the end of the year, we never really quite made it to that $2,000 mark. We're at 1933. Maybe Christmas, we do a bit better, but, maybe October, you don't do so well. So, 10% is kind of, keep it quite reasonable. So we aimed a little bit higher there, still wasn't good enough. So let's play with something else. So maybe we just play with the price and we go, okay, what happens if we charge $85 per bottle and we still aim for 15 bottles in the first month? You can see, well, we actually we could hit that at that, but now you're charging a little bit more, people are going to buy it. So you need to kind of factor that in. So yeah, let's go crazy and go, fuck it. What's our fuck yeah goal? Let's make $10,000 a month by the end of the year. What happens if we're really aggressive? So we stick with that $85 a bottle and we push really hard to try sell 50 bottles. And because we're selling 50, maybe we put in some kind of viral tool where people are sharing it or whatever it is. And we go, cool, let's aim for 20% month-to-month growth. Then you can see by the end of the year, we could make $10,000. So, that's why I say, play with these numbers, always make your models formulaic. So you can either pay with stuff like the price, play with the growth. And so this is something that I always do very early on when I'm just thinking about a business, like, does this actually make financial sense? And Max, how are we going with the lag? Are we?
Yeah, much better. Much better.
Much
yeah,
better.
that's good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's see if all good now. Great. Yeah, cool. So look, next up, I just want to kind of reiterate this kind of the back of the napkin validation. And so once again, it's just at high level, like what's it going to take to get to 10,000, 100,000, $1 million? How many customers? What I need to get a basic salary, and is the effort worth the reward? To kind of go in further, once you make a certain amount of money, you can start adding salaries and start adding salespeople and other things like that. But that's a lot more kind of high-end financial modeling. But this is just very basic validation modeling. So yeah, let's just drop just some startup knowledge for the people that aren't used to kind of startups. So the main thing here is really just understanding that your CAC, so your cost per acquisition, or your cost to acquire customer, it needs to be less than your LTV, which is your lifetime value. That's where you've got financial viability. So to just play into that kind of, let's say the noble sage, if we're spending $100 on Facebook ads and we're getting one customer and they're buying it at $80 in that example, $85, I'm losing money because I'm spending $100, I'm getting 85 back without factoring all these cogs and everything. What you really want to do is try, use that contribution margin, which we had to play with within that to try acquire customers. So you've kind of, that's how much you've kind of got to play with. So it's a little bit further back, which is somewhere over here, where kind of we had this, our costs were $32, and we have kind of $48 to kind of share between us, but we could use like $10 to acquire customer. We then basically have like $38 that we could kind of use to cover other fixed costs and then kind of eventually pay us. But if we're spending more than $80 to acquire customer, or at least more than $48, we're not making any money whatsoever. And then you've kind of got this lifetime value, which is, how long is the customer going to be with us? What's the actual lifetime value to a business? Can we get them on a subscription service where they're getting a cocktail every month? Something like LTV is much more important in software companies. And it's very hard to guess how much your LTV is going to be early on. You just kind of have to play it out and see. But it's a really important concept that you really need to understand when starting a business. The next concept is just runway. It's like, how much money do you have before you're going to run out of money and die? So, I put in $5,000 into the cocktail business, or $10,000 or $1,000, and, how far is that really going to go? With no code, and even with startups, it's quite easy to start a business, but to actually run and maintain a business, that's where it's costly. So it's like paying for ads or just, keeping food on the table. That's what's really hard. So when you raise money, as a startup, you usually raise for about 18 months. You kind of know what you're going to achieve in that time. And if you don't achieve it by that time, you're going to die. That's your runway. And so that's kind of your phase end goal. So what are you trying to achieve before you, with that capital raise? And you have two options. It's either like you're cash flow positive, you don't need to raise more money, or you need to raise capital again. Those are really your only two options. So for bootstrapping businesses, these kind of side hustle businesses, no code businesses, it's really just trying to get to cash flow positive as soon as possible. So work out what numbers you need to get there to them, and then kind of writing them down and committing to them, and letting the team know that we're getting to these goals because we want to be cash flow positive, so we don't need to raise another round, or we want to get to these sales because we're throwing a bunch of money, we're burning it, but if we get to this, we can raise money at a high valuation. And we just raise it, $2 million. And if we get to there, we can raise 10, and then we're kind of sweet and we don't have to raise for a little while. So just more about I throw in a bit more just about SaaS, because I know a lot of people in no code are looking at building micro SaaS tools. So, another concept is just leaky bucket, and just understanding that, a leaky bucket is when your churn is way too high and everything that you're putting in the top is really just coming out the bottom, because you can't keep those customers. You just can't maintain them. And so it's totally normal and totally fine to have churn. 2%, I think it is, or 5% under that is fine. But if you're hitting 20, 30, 50, 100%, you don't have a business. It's just coming in and going out the other side. So then other than that, how do you fix that? So, it's always worth thinking from the get-go about your LTV, and thinking about how you can minimize churn by doing stuff like just planning for churn. It's always going to happen, so you might as well plan for it. Plan 2%, 5%, and then basically constantly gauging your LTV, how long a customer is going to last, and what you're hoping to kind of keep them and how long you're going to keep them for. Other things is just loyalty, just providing discounts for them staying longer. That's why you see SaaS tools do stuff like, pay $10 a month. So it's $120 a year, or just pay $100 for the year. You kind of get a discount up front, so you can kind of extend out that contract. And when that contract's about to end, just, keeping in touch with them and trying to get them to come back. And that's where building trust and building a relationship goes a long way. I finished my 100 days of no code, but I'm still doing my mastermind with Max. So Max has kind of kept me in the community because I trust Max. We've got a relationship. And that's where you often have salespeople that sell the tool, and then you put them onto account managers to kind of maintain the relationship. And people aren't going to churn if there's trust there, the tool's working, they have someone they can talk to. And then the next thing is just upsell, cross-sell, partner up. So, sell them onto something else, or, with Max, if I'm doing the 100 days of no code challenge, the fact that I can use some other tool for 50% off is a really big benefit to me. So that's him partnering with someone else, or cross-selling some other tool that he's selling as well. And we're kind of towards the end. So just, really quick math to understand your business. So what happens if you decrease COGS? Basically, your cost margin goes up, or your margin goes up. If you decrease the price, your contribution margin goes down. If your churn increases, your LTV decreases, or you have to kind of reduce that cost per acquisition, or your CAC. And then what happens if your cost per acquisition increases? It basically means that you have to increase your LTV, or you have to decrease that to make sure you kind of don't mess with your LTV too much. So you've got to know all these kind of levers that work in your business. And I do have to say, ultimately at the end of this, when it comes to, I think Fiestify, it was only when I was looking to kind of raise funding that I sat down and did a really complex financial analysis. And I realized all the levers in my business and what happens if I spent a bit more, or my LTV went up, or my churn was happening. Knowing all these levers is so important, so that when someone comes to you, or an intern comes to you, or someone marketing goes, hey, our CAC just went up from $10 to $20. Is that a problem? And you can go, yeah, that's a massive problem, because this is how that affects our business, our LTV. That's, I would say, the fundamental thing. So once I've done my financials, I usually just do a quick, lean business canvas. This has been around for quite a while now. You can just Google Lean Business Canvas and just fill this out. And Lean Business Canvas is meant to stop you doing a proper business report, so that you don't spend months planning a business report. You just quickly knock it up in 30 minutes or an hour. And kind of early on, every week you might do it, and then every month, every 3 months, every 6 months. And a lot of these things are assumptions early on, and later on you're just kind of trying to prove out these assumptions. And it's a really good way to put your idea there and kind of validate it. And yeah, so that's it. Recap. We went through my kind of model on how I validate businesses. And we started with validating an idea. Firstly, we started with evaluating an idea, actually, whether it's actually worth you doing it, whether you're passionate about it. And then we looked at validating it really quickly, stuff like competitors, looking at the pain, the total addressable market. Then we looked at, goals and anti-goals, setting your goal, your fuck yeah goal, what things you don't want to achieve, and then looking into just really quick financials, what's going to take to this to be a $10,000, $100,000, $1 million business. And then, once you've done all that stuff, throw in a lean business canvas. If you want to keep going with it, think about, what you're going to name it, the business identity, what's it going to stand for, what colors you want, how you're going to build it, and then just get building. And the one way I think about building is just quickly writing down, what can I do in 1 hour? What can I do in 1 day? What can I do in 1 week? What can I do in 1 month? And that's to kind of stop you doing research. Or cool, I just came up with an idea. What can I do in 1 hour? It's just put this on Twitter, put this on Reddit. Hey guys, does anyone have any problems with booking dentist appointments? I absolutely hate it. Think about building a tool. Would anyone be interested? That's something you can do right now. So yeah, that's it. That's me. That's the interested in seeing what questions came up, but hope that helped. And yeah, I'm easily contactable on Twitter's my main one. So that's me on Twitter. I've got a newsletter that I try send out every month when I'm not building businesses, which is all the time. But I like to put some of my thoughts in that newsletter as well as share them on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, but I much prefer people reach out to me on Twitter because I can kind of get back to you better, quicker. So yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kev. That was really, really insightful. Yeah, I guess just in the kind of few minutes left, does anyone have any questions for Kev? Yeah, thanks so much again, Kev. That was really great.
I should also point out that one of my kind of older brothers, mentors, Venko, is on this call, and he's a very seasoned CEO at a listed company. I worked with him at JRide. He's actually a CEO at multiple companies now, but if you have questions on startups, you've got Venko on the call as well, which is pretty cool to see. So yeah, Venko, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah, just come off mute. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, yeah. I think a question for me is on the conviction front. Is that just when you're kind of talking about that? Is that a gut feel thing, or is that off the back of? Because you can have conviction off the back of just being excited, or a combination of excitement and oh yeah, this is I've seen people visibly have pain. What do you base that off?
Yeah, I think my conviction is there's other businesses that are already kind of selling in the space, so you kind of know. And then yeah, look, a lot of that conviction, that early conviction, that's the evaluation thing. So it's really just me asking questions. So I'm not validating just yet. It's really asking myself, would I buy this? Do I know people who'd buy it? And I'm really just in my own head at that point. That's really before I go and validate. So it's certainly gut feel. And I do try to ask myself, realistically, have I seen people buy this before? Is there something in the market already? So that's where the kind of conviction is. So with the tech report, there was someone who's already doing this report. And it was actually Venko's wife that mentioned on a podcast that it's strange that Venko's on the call, but and so they were talking about it and saying how they used to be this newsletter, and I remember the newsletter and I missed it. So from a conviction point of view, I knew that I really wanted it, and recently I'd heard on this podcast that people hey, where'd that newsletter go? So I had a pretty strong 10 out of 10 conviction that people wanted this without having to do major research in it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Cool. I've got one more question actually, but yeah, I just want to make sure, David and Elaine, in case you have any questions, if you can't come off mute, just put your questions in the chat. In the meantime, though, I'm just curious because I know you're thinking after the liquor company or your next focus, you want to kind of get your hands on or build some form of SaaS or get into kind of digital products a bit more. How are you going to approach that process of finding that problem? Of course, you've laid it out today, but how are you thinking about that uniquely? That kind of a micro SaaS kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a bit different because I think with the micro SaaS stuff, you're really looking to solve a very simple, particular niche of a problem, which means you can kind of only charge so much. So I think it's kind of an interesting space where I don't want to make an assumption that you're kind of like the size of your business can only be so big. Because I don't think that's true. I think you can kind of like prove a business out in a really small niche and then think about what can you plug into this to make it like significantly bigger. So like one of the spaces I'm thinking about is kind of the remote work and how people kind of engage with their colleagues remotely. I have kind of a friend, a colleague in the space that's kind of doing something like that, and basically they're offering a bunch of like stuff like cocktail tastings and magic shows and all this stuff on that. And the way I would approach this really is focusing just on one of those things, like very much uniquely in a particular niche, and then kind of weighing out that you're paying a lot less, like $5 a month for this tool, with the idea that you kind of do those other things after that. So yeah, from a micro SaaS perspective, it's really just like you're kind of charging a lot less and then building out and kind of knowing where you can build out and where you can eventually get to where you start adding different components into the tool. So that's how I'm thinking about it differently. Whereas like, I think with other companies I was involved in, or like bigger software that aren't micro SaaS, you're really looking at building like a whole kind of logistics tool that solves a bunch of things. And you can charge a bit more, but it's going to take you a lot longer to build out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, thank you. Cool. Okay, just in case anyone's got any questions before we wrap up. Just kind of come with me. Oh, David. Yeah.
I think I have got a question regarding the last point you had, like what can you do in like 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month? Is that like you put the goals and the actions? Do you have like a more system in place for this? Or like,
that model is basically from an entrepreneur called Sean Paree from like My First Million podcast, and I was on his all access pass, and he has like a Notion project kickoff doc where he basically puts some of the stuff like goals, anti-goals in a Notion doc, and does like, what can I do in a week? Sorry, what can I do in an hour? What can I do in a week? What can I do in a month? And he does write down those specific things to make sure he actually takes action. And I've been doing the same thing. So I like to think, and it's not a lot. It's just like, it's like 3 dot points. So what can I do in an hour? As I said, with that dentist one, it might be like, I'm just going to post on Reddit. I'm going to post on Twitter. I'm going to call a friend who's a dentist, ask them if they have a problem. What can I do in a day? It's like I could spin up a website, like with a value proposition. What can I do in a week? I can send Google ads to this website. I can try get in contact with some dentist authority. I don't know why I'm going with this dentist route, but it just came to me. So, and then in a month, it's about setting those goals, and you move some of them around. But I just use a Notion doc to just plug them out, and it's kind of 3 to 5 dot points each.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Can you see that question in the chat as well?
Yeah. Let me just see. Yeah. Venko is going to ask me some tough one. Okay, so got a question for you, Kev. Reacquiring customers via paid online marketing channels, example, Facebook, considering margin left over after revenue less COGS, what is a good rule of thumb on how much you should spend on acquiring customers? You mentioned $10 or your $48 remote. Is that a good guide, or how do you think about it? Sorry, it's late here. Look, you've got you'll have a certain margin left over. I don't really know. I guess like the rule of thumb is that you just can't spend more than your kind of initially your cost, but then your kind of that contribution margin. So if you had $48 for you to spend, you don't want to spend more than that. Like at minimum, if you spend the $48, you're just going to come out even. So that's not great. It's not a good outcome. But if it's a true startup, like look, the Noble Sage Liquor Company, we're different in that we're barrel aging cocktails and we have no other presence. But in terms of like a true startup, are we that? No, we're not. A startup is something that's operating in like complete uncertainty with the product that's never existed before. People have sold alcohol since kind of almost the beginning of time. We're doing it a slightly different way. But if you're a true, startup that's never kind of proven this out before, then technically, as long as you could try sell it for kind of the cost, it's a good place to start, because you can always bring your CAC down. You're never going to get your CAC like super low from the get-go. Actually, back in the day with Facebook, you kind of get your CAC super low, like you'd be acquiring customers for like 12 cents. And then when you start scaling it up and you've gone from like 2 customers to 2,000, you're now charging like $12 per customer. So, you know, you really want to kind of, as I say, just keep it lower than your actual cost. Sometimes you can't even do that. That's why a lot of SaaS companies kind of go into this kind of valley of death where they overspend with the hope that their LTV is going to be significantly high in the long run. So yeah, you just know that if you're spending like $1,000 and your product's worth $100, it's like, it's not that good. But if you kind of have the runway to go, cool, let's try get it low and lower, let's try increase the price. Well, our LTV in the long run is going to be worth a lot more than that. We can just hold out, we can just raise money. Then you're going to be, I'm not going to say you're going to be okay because you're a startup. But yeah, you can spend a bit more initially. There's no rule of thumb, but just understanding these concepts will do more to keep you afloat, because your job as a founder or CEO is just not to run out of money. Like that is your sole goal. You can change your company, you can pivot, but if you run out of money, you failed effectively. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good wisdom here. Yeah, it's good. It's refreshing to talk about this stuff in the no code space. I don't think it's really talked about much. So thank you for sharing all of this. And of course, yeah, really good luck with your like week 1 launch of the Noble Sage. I'm sure you're going to sell out soon. It sounds like it's going well already. But do you want to leave us with anything, Kev, in terms of final words, closing remarks on the presentation you've given today?
Yeah, I would just say like the closing remarks is really just, you know, we validate ideas by kind of going out there and finding pain points, but it's also a really good idea just to think about whether the business is financially viable and understanding if the risk is worth the reward. And I don't think people stay away from numbers. Like I just know there's certain people who like math and there's certain people who don't like math. And just taking a few minutes, even if you're not strong at it, asking someone who's good on Excel to sit with you and go, hey, I'm thinking of starting a business. And I'd like to kind of make this my full-time thing. Can you help me do that? And someone who, you know, someone should be able to do it with you in 30 minutes, or, you know, learn how to do it because it's super viable, it's like super important. And as I said, like when you have a company and you understand like the levers that you can pull to make it work, it just like changes the way you think about that business and what you focus on, because you know, like I think with Fiestify, I ran that for about 3.5 years, and a lot of people been kind of coming at me with Noble Sage saying, you know, where's your socials? Where's like social media? Where's all this other stuff? Like kind of all the fat around the kind of muscle of this business. And I literally got some up like within 30 minutes today. People like, they're so awesome. How long did they take you? They didn't know it took 30 minutes, but I think I was hesitant doing it because, you know, I spent like 3 years, and you kind of plug away at things and you know that with some of these things, they don't always pay off. So if you know what actually like contributes to the bottom line and what actually contributes to sell and what actually works, then you kind of know what to go for. And so understanding those levers is just so important. I just cannot reiterate enough. So doing financial modeling without getting too complicated, just like something like this, is just a really good way to think about your business. And you can always get more complicated later on, but just starting with it, I think is a really underappreciated part of validating a business.
Yeah, I've certainly fallen into that trap as well before. So and it's good to have that reminder for sure. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks again, Kev. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. And the recording will be up tomorrow, so you can kind of catch bits if you want to rewatch it. And yeah, have a lovely sleep, Kev, because you're probably quite knackered at this point in time. So
I'm gonna go have I'm actually gonna have a virtual drink with my business partner now.
Oh, amazing.
10, and he's like, I'm staying online. We're gonna grab a beer, whatever, by call, and celebrate. Yeah, we just got I'm just going to phone. We did get orders during the call, so that's pretty exciting.
That's cool.
So yeah, we're excited about that. So we're celebrating that. And thanks so much for having me, Max. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, of course. Well, have a good one, guys, and speak soon.
Okay.
Yeah, cheers. Bye bye.
Cheers.